What is going on, everybody? What is going on, the Catch fam? Hope everyone is having a phenomenal start to the week. Hope everyone's Monday was just fan-freaking-tastic. We've got a special stream coming to you guys tonight. We're going to be going through a running back only mock fantasy football draft for the 2022 fantasy football season. This will kind of help us start to determine my personal running back rankings. These aren't necessarily official early rankings, right, for myself here at the Catch, but these are, this is just to get the brain stimulated, just to get running backs somewhat overall ranked and starting to form those tiers for the 2022 fantasy football season here before the NFL draft happens at the end of the month. So hit that like button on the way in, baby. Hit that subscribe button if you are new here. If you are new to the Catch, go ahead and join the Catch fam today. Man, we've been doing a ton of mock drafts the past couple of days. I've been playing around with some solo mock drafts, drafting multiple teams, 8 teams, 10 teams. I do think I will attempt a 12-team mock draft by myself this week, but nonetheless, we will be drafting with you guys, with our amazing subscriber base here at the Catch Wednesday night at 8 p.m. sharp. Right now, the link is only on our Discord page, which is completely free to join, down in the description below. And I will be posting that link to our YouTube page tomorrow so that everyone can get joined and all of that good stuff. So let's have some fun, man. Let's hang out tonight. Let's talk some fantasy football. Like I said, we're going through a mock draft with running backs only. Going to be drafting them in the order that I think that they are the best overall, right? So let's have some fun. Let's talk some fantasy. I am relatively tired tonight. Monday kicked my butt. I am not going to lie to you guys, but I am still stoked as ever, excited as ever to hang out with you guys. So get in the live chat. Let's hang out. Let's talk some fantasy football, baby. All right. Number one's pretty damn easy, right? I think, over the past couple solo mock drafts that I've done, we've basically touched on the number one overall consensus pick. I think for just about everyone in any fantasy football platform, you're going with Jonathan Taylor, not just as your number one running back overall, but as your number one player overall going into the 2022 fantasy football season. I mean, what he did last year was just astronomical. Such a phenomenal leap from his rookie season to his sophomore campaign. 1,800 rushing yards off 332 rushing attempts, 18 rushing touchdowns. He had 40 receptions off 51 targets, 360 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. So not a ton of PPR upside. We do know that Nahim Heinz steals most of that, but he did, present some pass catching ability, which does obviously help his overall fantasy value. But overall, he just doesn't necessarily need that extreme PPR upside to even be 110% fantasy relevant. I think that this phenomenal campaign continues in 2022, but we should be aware that naturally, more than likely, there will be some regression to these numbers, but I don't think by a whole lot personally, right? We've got a new quarterback. We've got Matt Ryan there. How does that affect things? Do the Colts pass the football a little bit more? It's possible. I do think that throughout the season, Carson Wentz struggled to really move the football down the field on a consistent basis. And the Colts really turned to their run game as well as their defense overall, right? So maybe you could argue that Matt Ryan takes away some of those rushing attempts overall from the offense. But, at the same time, Matt Ryan is in a veteran stage of his career. And maybe the Colts still go to the run first overall, right? And even if you're going to argue that the Colts are moving the football down the field through the passing game more, that at the end of the day will present more scoring opportunities for a running back like Jonathan Taylor, who had 18 rushing touchdowns last season. So don't get me wrong. Do I think he will have the season he had in 2021? Probably not, right? We very, very rarely see, that number one running back from a previous year repeat. But at the same time, there's just no running back I would personally take over Jonathan Taylor at this given moment. So let's go ahead and let's take him off the board as our first overall running back in this running back only fantasy football mock draft. Okay, moving on to pick 2, man. I think the most difficult selections for tonight will be between picks 2 and 4, right? And like I said, these aren't official rankings by any means. This is really just to get our rankings and our tiers starting to form for myself personally. Maybe not necessarily my co-host Steven's running back rankings or tiers, right? But it's tough, right? Because picks 2 through 4, there's a lot of, really good argument for who should be there, right? And we've seen a lot of different players at both the running back and the receiver position taken in our mock drafts with you guys, and even in the solo mock drafts that I've done here in the offseason. So even if we take the receivers like Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson that we've seen taken very early, mostly Cooper Kupp in this range, it still complicates things when we're looking at the running back position only. So let's go ahead and just make sure we've only got running backs highlighted. But there's a lot of different routes we could go here. Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, probably my next 2 guys cemented no matter what, right? And listen, man, all last offseason, right, I had Derrick Henry as my RB2 going into the 2021 fantasy football season. I was a little bit higher on him than most people wanted to, but while my belief overall that the PPR value didn't matter was correct, the belief that a lot of other people had that this is finally the year we see Derrick Henry potentially get hurt came true for a lot of people, right? That's, Steven, my co-host's main point of not wanting to draft Derrick Henry last season. So it's kind of hard for me to put Derrick Henry number 2 overall, although once again, I really want to. I've just always been a huge fan of Derrick Henry from a fantasy football standpoint. And I just like Derrick Henry, right? He's a player that I want to draft. He's also similar to another running back we'll get to shortly in Christian McCaffrey, where I think at the moment he's giving a little bit of worry overall to fantasy owners, fantasy managers, right? At the same time, I don't have a problem whatsoever if he's taken second off the clock. But for the sake of tonight, we'll shift gears a little bit. I'm going to put Austin Eckler at number 2 overall. And there's a couple reasons for this, right? First of all, he did finish his RB2 last season, so it's kind of convenient that he fits right in here. He even played through a lot of injuries and ups and downs last season, and he still showed up every single week except week 16 against an awful Houston run defense, right? And outside of that, he showed up with double-digit fantasy points every single week of the season except week 6 against Baltimore, where he barely missed the mark at 9.5 fantasy points in full PPR. So, I love what we saw out of Austin Eckler in terms of durability last season, and also he offers that extreme PPR upside. 94 targets 2021, 70 receptions off of those 94 targets, 647 receiving yards, and 8 receiving touchdowns. You love to see those 8 receiving touchdowns, right? On top of that, I really like the direction that the Chargers offense is going in overall, right? Offensive line, probably going to be much more improved through the draft. They re-signed Mike Williams, which, listen, Mike Williams, from a fantasy perspective, made a lot of us happy early in the season last season. Then he kind of fell off to some degree. But at the same time, I really like the re-signing of Mike Williams because he has that great chemistry with Justin Herbert, and he gives Justin Herbert a second security blanket behind Keenan Allen. They also added Jared Everett at the tight end position, which I really like. I don't know if Jared Cook is staying, if he was on a 1-year deal or a 2-year deal, but I personally like Jared Cook in that offense as well. And the defense improving, I think, really will make a big difference for the Chargers offense as a whole. A lot of great additions. You got Khalil Mack, which is just absolutely scary. Derwin James should be able to stay healthy. And then we don't see... they obviously added a big name at corner as well, which for some reason isn't listed here. But I also like the signing of Sebastian Joseph Day, right? But you add Jackson from the Patriots as well. You've already got Joey Bosa there. There are rumors that the Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu could come to this team. There are rumors that Stephon Gilmore could come to this team, and they still have an entire draft as well. So, in a nutshell, I think that the defense being improved will help this offense overall and their young quarterback as well. And I know I've gone in a lot of different directions here, but in the day, I think Austin Eckler and this offense is just going to be much more explosive overall. And Austin Eckler is, in a position to absolutely eat next season. So I'll put him number 2 tonight, and thus far in this early rankings, beginnings of a ranking, we'll call it, for tonight. Our RB only mock draft. Anthony, what's up, baby? What's going on, man? Good to have you in the chat. Appreciate you stopping by, man. What's going on? Jerry, what up, baby? What's going on, man? What's up, everyone? What is up, Jerry? How many teams do we usually have for the mock drafts? 12 or 14? Usually we have 12. We can start to mess around with some 14 team mock drafts if that's something you guys are interested in, though. All right, moving along here. Third overall, man, I think we have to stick with Derrick Henry. I think it's going to be difficult for a lot of fantasy owners to pass on him if he is available at the 3rd overall pick. You could argue for Najee Harris. You could argue for Javonte Williams. And even, I would say, Joe Mixon or Christian McCaffrey and probably Dalvin Cook as well, which are, I basically just named the next couple players we're going to go over, but that's fine. I just think with the pace that he was on last season, he only played 8 games, and he still rushed for 937 rushing yards and 10 rushing touchdowns. I don't know exactly where he finished in rushing touchdowns with that number, but it was a lot more than a lot of running backs that go between the 2nd and 3rd round, right? A phenomenal pace that he was on last season. Jerry coming in here, should we really be worried about Henry's injury? I'm not worried, but what you do see overall is the amount of rushing attempts since 2018 are just so incredibly high. Almost 400 in 2020, and he was on pace for similar numbers last season. This has been the fear of drafting Derrick Henry in fantasy football year after year, is eventually those tires are going to give out, right? And we saw it last season, right? It happens at the running back position. Henry had 17 rushing touchdowns in 2020. Last year, 2021, he had 10, Jerry. Yeah. So, listen, I just think for the most part, fantasy owners are going to look at that pace that he was on and choose to draft him. But there are going to be plenty of fantasy owners who are going to look at him, see what happened with the injuries last season, and pass on him, which I can understand. So, I'm going to put him 3rd for tonight. And we have seen him go about, anywhere from pick 2 to pick 5 in most of our subscriber mock drafts. So we'll put him here for tonight, and that's because I still believe in him. But the other thing with Derrick Henry is that you just don't get a lot of PPR upside at all, right? Over the last couple of seasons, he's never had more than 31 targets, right? And I would guess that this average is much closer to 20 throughout his career. So it's not how he gets it done. He doesn't need to get it done when he is fully healthy. But just keep in mind that, for a lot of fantasy owners, that's going to take away a lot of value for Derrick Henry. Moving along, there's a lot of interesting names we could put here, man. Truly a lot of interesting directions we could go. For the sake of tonight's mock draft, I'm going to keep tooting the horn for Javonte Williams to move up and up and up in the fantasy communities. overall running back rankings, right? And listen, there are a lot of other names that you could argue in front of Javonte Williams, but I do truly believe by the time we are doing serious 2022 fantasy football mock drafts, by the time that September is coming closer and closer, that Javonte Williams will be skyrocketed in overall average draft projection, including all football positions, right, for fantasy football. So listen, 903 rushing yards, 203 rushing attempts, 4 rushing touchdowns in his rookie season, 53 targets and 3 receiving touchdowns, 316 receiving yards, 43 receptions. I totally just said all his receiving stats completely out of order, but oh well. Listen, all those numbers accomplished with a 50-50 split, which included Melvin Gordon, right? We know that Melvin Gordon is not likely to re-sign with the Denver Broncos, so that is good news for Javonte Williams and fans of Javonte Williams, right? Melvin Gordon's in free agency. There are rumors he's in contract talks with the Ravens. We'll see if that happens, right? But nonetheless, it does not seem that Javonte Williams will be re-signing with the Denver Broncos. On top of that, you have the addition of Russell Wilson at the quarterback position. You have what many would argue to be an elite receiving core, a receiving core that has the potential to be elite with Sutton, Judy, and Tim Patrick. You have a head coaching change. There's a lot going on here. I will say we've heard the argument that historically over the past couple of years, the Broncos have not stuck to a one running back system. They've taken that committee approach, which they could very well do with a running back who is not Melvin Gordon, right? You got Mike Boone there. There's probably not a running back on this current roster, but they could potentially look in free agency as well as the NFL draft at the end of this month, right? So I've heard that argument, but I just think that the Broncos are going to have a lot of red zone trips next season, and they present a lot of scoring opportunities for Javonte Williams overall. And I truly, truly think he is probably going to be the most hyped up running back in the fantasy community as we continue to get closer and closer day by day to September. So I'm going to take him 4th overall, right? Call me crazy. Alrighty. Moving on. 5th running back in tonight's RB only draft. I'm going to go Joe Mixon. You guys know I had to take... Oh, hit the wrong button. You guys know that I have to go with my conviction here, and I've got to take Joe Mixon early. There's a couple reasons for this. First of all, PPR scoring format, he finished as RB4 last season. You guys know that I personally really reflect on previous year's numbers, which some people don't. Some people try to look outside the box, like my co-host Steven, right? We kind of have opposite approaches in terms of how we draft, which is kind of why we collaborate so well in terms of moving into a new fantasy football season. But listen, number 4 overall last season, 1,200 rushing yards, 292 rushing attempts, 13 rushing touchdowns, 48 targets, 42 receptions, 314 receiving yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns. So I love the numbers by Joe Mixon, but on top of that, in this current offseason, the Cincinnati Bengals have just absolutely bolstered that offensive line. Like, they have made it arguably one of the most elite offensive lines in the entire National Football League, right? And I absolutely love that for Joe Mixon. I love it for Joe Burrow as well, but I really just think that Mixon is going to eat next season. I think defensive coordinators are going to be busy focusing on how in the hell are we going to stop Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd, and what I think is an underrated signing right now of Hayden Hurst at the tight end position. So don't be wrong, Joe Mixon's going to draw some defensive attention, but I just think that defensive coordinators are going to be more focused on that receiving core, right? We did see Samaje Perine get some nice work last season when Mixon was banged up and just kind of at random times as well, but he didn't really eat into the overall carries too badly, right? 55 rushing attempts, 246 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, 31 targets overall, less than 200 receiving yards, and 1 receiving touchdown. So he didn't eat into things too badly. Those are pretty standard RB2 numbers, right? So I think that there's no real concern there. You could argue that there's some concern overall in terms of Mixon and injuries, but really he didn't miss a lot of time last season. And he had a great stretch. I mean, weeks 1 through week 12, he only had one game where he did not have double-digit fantasy points, right? Had a little bit of a rougher stretch, weeks 13 through weeks 17, but he still came out with two very, very big fantasy performances, right, including week 16, which was, the first week of fantasy playoffs for most of you guys, and still finished off pretty nicely in week 17. Then I believe that the Bengals had already clinched playoffs in week 18, right? So I don't think he even started that game, is why I missed it. So listen, man, I feel great about Joe Mixon overall. I'm very, very high. I want to have him, ranked higher than a lot of other members of the fantasy community, because I just have that personal conviction. I want to express it, right? So that's where I'm at right now, man. Jerry, you're high on Mixon, so I really hope he has a good year, or you won't hear the end of it. Exactly, man. Put the pressure on me, because I'd rather it pay off than he has a good season. He's being overlooked, which in a lot of our, catch fan mock drafts, I do think that he is being overlooked. He fell to me personally in the mock draft that we did last night. Wow, my dad Brighton is in full gear to the 10th overall pick, and I was ecstatic about that, right? And we've seen him go anywhere from like pick 5 to pick 12, and I think he's another guy who could create a lot of buzz as we get closer to the fantasy season, but he could also be slept on in a lot of leagues as well. All right, moving on here. At this point, I am going to go and take Najee Harris off of the board. There's a lot of things to like about Najee Harris, right? You could argue, right, I just talked about Joe Mixon being RB4 in PPR last season. Well, Najee Harris was RB3, right? And he had a phenomenal rookie season. I mean, look at this stretch, man. Week 1 against Buffalo. Buffalo's run defense was playing lights out at that point in the season. But really, look at the overall numbers. He only had 4 performances where he was under double-digit fantasy points. I mean, just a phenomenal rookie campaign. Exactly 1,200 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns, 467 receiving yards off 74 receptions, 94 targets, and 3 receiving touchdowns. The nice thing with Najee Harris that you're not getting from a couple of the running backs we just went over is he does offer some very nice PPR upside. There's a little bit of fear in terms of the fact that Mitchell Trubisky is more than likely going to be the quarterback for the Steelers next season. They could draft someone as well. We don't know if they do. Will that quarterback start right away? It's hard to say, right? So there's some fear with that. But overall, you could also argue that if the quarterback play is not great, that the Steelers will be utilizing the run game more than ever. So, listen, maybe I'm a little bit lower on Najee Harris than some people would argue, but I think that there's a couple looming fears around drafting Najee Harris for some fantasy owners, fantasy managers, and then for other people, there's, it's a no-brainer, and he's an absolute steal, especially if he's fallen to 6 overall. I mean, we've seen him go anywhere from pick 1, and one of our drafts he got picked number 1 overall, but we've seen him go anywhere from pick 1 to pick 7 or 8, right? So I like Najee Harris quite a bit, and listen, I think he could be a big steal of the 2022 drafts, kind of similar to a Joe Mixon, right? Those are 2 backs that I feel really good about. And the nice thing with Najee Harris, similar to Javonte Williams, is that he is obviously going into his sophomore campaign, and there's a lot of youth involved, less potential risk for injury, so to speak. That comes up with Javonte Williams as well. So I like Najee as the 6th back in our RB only mock draft tonight. All right, moving on to 7th overall. I think at this point there's 2 backs that you just have to look at, and that's Dalvin Cook and CMC. And these are 2 very different running backs in terms of how they're making the fantasy community feel at the moment. I'll go ahead and I'll take Dalvin Cook off of the board. Could really argue this in either direction, but Cook was hurt a lot last season. Missed week 3 and week 5, and then missed week 16. But to his credit, he did play at when we did not expect him to play, right? And he came back a lot sooner, still finished as a top 20 fantasy running back last season. Still finished with over 1,100 rushing yards off 249 attempts and 6 rushing touchdowns. Saw a little bit less in terms of PPR upside than we're used to, right? Doesn't always score a lot when it comes to PPR, right? They'd rather just hand him off the football. We've seen 29 rushing touchdowns in 2020 2019 combined, but he usually offers at least 350 300 receiving yards overall, right? And he didn't have, he only had a couple less targets overall. So that was a little bit disappointing. I mean, Dalvin Cook was someone who in most fantasy rankings going into last season was ranked at least number 2 or number 3, at worst number 4 overall, right? Injuries definitely played into that a bit, but listen, I do think that fantasy managers moving into 2022 are concerned about Dalvin Cook and injuries, so they're looking at some of these more youthful running backs, with the exception maybe of Derrick Henry or Austin Eckler, maybe even I've got Mixon higher than most people do, right? But overall, there's some looming fears about our boy Dalvin Cook, and I think he could be an absolute steal in 2022 fantasy football drafts if he can stay healthy, right? And if he doesn't, we'll talk about Alexander Madison much later in tonight's draft, but I love Madison as a handcuff situation overall. Dev, what's up, baby? What's going on, dog? Good to have you in the building tonight. What's going on, Dev? What's up, brother? Jerry, would you be happy with having Cook or CMC on your team going into next season? Dev says, personally, I'd take Cook over CMC. Dude is the king of injuries, and he's not getting younger. Yeah, I kind of agree with you, but I also drafted CMC number 1 overall last season, so I have a little bit more bias-y than some fantasy owners. And you know what? It's not a bad time to bring up CMC because I am going to go ahead and take him off the board here. And really, when we're looking at Christian McCaffrey, we've talked about this the last couple of nights in our solo mock drafts, as well as our mock drafts with our subscriber base, right? And with Christian McCaffrey, it just comes down to, are you willing to take that risk, right? Because it can absolutely pay off. We know what he's capable of doing when he is healthy, but the last 2 seasons, as you guys can see, we've seen a lot of holes overall in those starts, and that is absolutely terrifying, not just from a fantasy standpoint, but from the price you have to pay, because you are still more than likely going to have to draft CMC at the end of the first round, if not the beginning, and if you're lucky, at the beginning of the second round. So, yeah, high risk, high reward, 100%, Dev. But for me, I would take a potential risk on Christian McCaffrey if I had the last pick of the first round in a draft, whether it's a 10-man league, a 12-man league, a 14-man league, maybe not an 8-man league, because I think there's going to be too many names that I like in that hypothetical. But if you can draft CMC and turn around and get a much more stable running back that you feel good about overall, then I like that direction more. And like I said, I'm a little bit biased because I drafted him last season with the first overall pick in my personal league, and therefore I don't feel great about taking him this coming season. But we've had a lot of members of the Catch fam, express that I am willing to take that risk on Christian McCaffrey. If it does not pan out, then I'm willing to pay the price. I'm just not there personally, but God, you just can't. There's a point in the draft where he is still the best talent at the running back position available, and it's very, very difficult to overlook him because we know what we know what he can do when he's 100% healthy, right? How about Montgomery or Herbert from Chicago? Yeah, we'll get to Montgomery not too far down the stretch. I actually think, he's being pretty underrated. And in terms of Herbert, I love Herbert as a handcuff situation as well. He played absolutely lights out when Montgomery was injured last season. I had both of them on my personal league team last season. So I love both of those running backs out of your team there, Dev, out of Chicago, right? I am a little bit worried about that offensive line, worried about Justin Fields in his sophomore season, not because I don't believe in Justin Fields, but more so because I haven't seen Chicago really do anything to help Justin Fields in the offseason, although their cap room situation is very, very bad. But I love Darnell Mooney as a wide receiver 1 for the Bears as well. So I do like a lot of pieces of that offense overall. All right, moving on, boys and girls. Let's see here. 9th overall is kind of interesting, man. There's a lot of different direction that you could go here, right? And for me, I feel like taking Alvin Kamara off the board makes the most sense, right? RB8 last season in full PPR. And, listen, I know that there's the legal issues potentially going on. If he serves a suspension, he obviously moves down the list quite a bit. If he doesn't, then I don't really understand why he's being so overlooked in fantasy right now. I guess it just 100% has to do with the fact that he may have a suspension issue, right, with the legal issues. But we know that he is the heartbeat of not just the Saints offense, but I would argue the Saints as a whole. We know that regardless of who's playing quarterback, which it looks like Jameis Winston will be the starting quarterback next season with Jameis re-signing, which I don't think is too bad of a thing for Alvin Kamara or fantasy as a whole for the Saints. But listen, he still missed 4 games last season and still finished as RB8 in full PPR. Like, we know the production he will give you. He doesn't have to rush for a ton of yards. He doesn't have to get a ton of rushing touchdowns. He offers just beautiful, beautiful PPR upside. Off 47 receptions, 439 receiving yards. That is, 9.34 yards per carry in the receiving game. 5 receiving touchdowns. I mean, I understand why he's being passed on currently in mock drafts, and it's because of the legal issues. But right now, he just seems like a no-brainer fantasy steal for me. And we'll find out more hopefully this month. I think his cases and everything, and as well as Dalvin Cook's, are both supposed to be this month. 2 very different situations, right? But I just think we cannot overlook Cook or Kamara too much. And Kamara, McCaffrey, and Cook were all in top 4 rankings going into 2021. So I think it makes sense to have them kind of in this next tier, right? But you are a little bit worried about injuries with these 3 guys as well as off the field issues at the moment. So it makes more sense to go with players who are not dealing with either of those aspects, right? Dev, definitely going to be some growing pains this season for a lot of teams in my eyes. 100%, man. We've got like a whole dynamic shift overall in the NFL. And if you're in the AFC, man, I just feel bad for you. But if you're in the NFC, it's wide open, man. So, hey, man, even the Bears got a shot, although the Vikings and Packers probably going to present some issues. But, and maybe even the Lions. Who the hell knows, man? The NFC is so completely wide open. All right, next on the list, man, it gets really interesting here, right? I'm going to go with Deandre Swift because he was on pace to be a top 5 fantasy running back last season. Some injuries, of course, and this is kind of going back to that argument for Kamara. Deandre Swift missed 4 games, finished as RB15, where Kamara missed 4 games and finished as RB8. Of course, in PPR scoring format, we're going off of there, but still a phenomenal season when healthy for Deandre Swift. 617 rushing yards, 5 rushing touchdowns, 452 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. So still over 1,000 yards from scrimmage for Deandre Swift. And like I said, he was on pace to be a top 5 running back before getting injured, right? And really, you could argue, he really did miss 5 games because he got injured against Chicago. So maybe that comparison to Alvin Kamara, not necessarily the best comparison there, but nonetheless, I'll go ahead and put Swift here because I do think that he offers some really nice PPR upside overall. Yeah, Swift definitely had some phantom injuries, always questionable, as Dev's pointing out here. It's 100% true. And he had all kinds of backs fill in for Jamal Williams, Craig Reynolds, Jamar Jefferson. And Guacamole. We could never pronounce his name right. We still can't. But listen, I actually feel somewhat decent about the Lions offense moving into next season. You got Swift at the running back position. We know that Jared Goff is a good enough game manager to get a team to the Super Bowl, although there are a lot of other aspects of that Rams team. But nonetheless, I like this receiving core, including the tight end position. Looking at Josh Reynolds, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Cephas had some good moments last season, as did Raymond. But then you also add in DJ Chark, who's a phenomenal receiver when healthy, right? I mean, looking at the numbers, right, he was actually on a very good pace. Pat Surtain absolutely ate him up in week 2 against Denver, but he had a really nice game against Houston and Arizona. And in case you're wondering, in my 20-man league, I did start him last minute in this week 4 game when he broke his ankle. But nonetheless, when we're looking at his numbers, we know what he can do from a fantasy standpoint, and he can produce 700 receiving yards in 13 games played in 2020, then just over 1,000 receiving yards 2019, right? And at least 5 touchdowns in both those seasons. So not crazy numbers by any means, but you guys have heard me, make some arguments for the Lions offense overall just being improved is all I got to say, right? Josh Reynolds has great chemistry with Jared Goff from those days and with the Rams, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown just looks electric, right? So I like Deandre Swift, and I think that they'll continue to build in the trenches, being a team led by Dan Campbell. So I think that offensive line will continue to improve as well. All right, next on the list, we're going to go ahead and go with Nick Chubb. Listen, I think Nick Chubb is being pretty underrated overall as well. Finished as a top 15 back in PPR, but he missed some time last season, and he had some underperforming games as well. Although the Browns as a whole had plenty of underperforming games, right? But still 1,200 rushing yards, 8 rushing touchdowns, and he just does not offer that PPR upside. If you play in half PPR or standard, he is a little bit more valuable. He gets in the end zone quite a bit. Now, Kareem Hunt also missed some time last season, and they are a very dynamic running back duo. And on top of that, man, don't forget about our boy Dearness Johnson, who had some absolutely baller moments last season filling in. Week 7 against Denver, week 10 against New England, played very well, and then even week 20 against Cincinnati as well. So a very good running back room for the Cleveland Browns. But if you're of the belief that the Browns offense is going to be more dynamic if and when Deshaun Watson plays for them this season, with a potential looming suspension or maybe not a looming suspension, we'll find out, right? But if you feel good about the Browns with the addition of Deshaun Watson as well as Amari Cooper, then you should feel pretty damn good about Nick Chubb as well. He is someone who you're probably going to want to draft some support with because he does have some looming injury concerns, right? 14 games played in 2021, then just 12 played in 2020. Really hasn't been fully healthy since 2019. But nonetheless, he is a phenomenal running back, and I do believe he should be taken off the board here. All right, moving on. This is where things are going to get really interesting, man. This is where we start to stray away from ADP potentially. So I'm going to take Leonard Fournette here, man. This is a run, finished as RB6 in PPR, right? And he was on pace for even better numbers before missing the last 3 games of the season, getting injured in that just awful performance by the Bucs. Still finished with 13 fantasy points in Week 15 against the Saints when everyone started to say that the Bucs season and Tom Brady and everyone was over. Who else got hurt in that game? Godwin and someone else got hurt in that game. But anyways, was it Gronk? I don't remember. Anyways, 811 rushing yards, 8 rushing touchdowns, 454 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. He just showed really, really nice chemistry with Tom Brady as a whole. So, yeah, obviously Tom Brady's back, right? He retired, he unretired, he's back, and Fournette has re-signed with the Bucs. So, I like Fournette a lot. Top 6 guy, full PPR, top 10 guy in standard scoring formats. I don't understand why he's being overlooked. I think he has a strong shot to repeat what he did last season. Speaking of players who have a strong shot to repeat what they did last season, who I don't understand them being overlooked, I'm putting James Conner next in tonight's draft. I absolutely love James Conner. If you guys have been with the channel since last season, you guys know that I absolutely love James Conner. He was a must-start running back for me every single week last season. Did miss some time, week 16, week 17, right? But really, when you look at what he did last season, got off to a little bit of a slow start. Chase Edmonds was making some buzz. Obviously, Chase Edmonds got hurt at points last season, but Chase Edmonds is now with the Miami Dolphins, right? I'm not worried about anyone else on this roster. This is your clear-cut RB1 for the Cardinals, who are also a very dynamic offense as a whole. Listen, just 752 rushing yards. Did have 202 attempts, though, which is pretty damn nice. Doesn't have a ton of PPR upside, but really, 37 receptions for 375 receiving yards. Look at that. Look at these numbers, man. 10 yards per catch. That is phenomenal. And 3 receiving touchdowns. 18 touchdowns on the season, man. I don't get it. I think he's being criminally underrated. I love me some James Conner, man. I would consider taking James Conner over a couple of these other running backs that we've taken before him, right? I would put him right next to Cook. Call me crazy, man. I got no beef with James Conner. If you got the conviction, as I always say, go ahead and get your guy. All right, moving on. I'm going to go ahead and take Zeke off the board here because I do think that Zeke is being kind of disrespected, right? I mean, this was a player who started in the rankings going in 2021, like in the top 4, top 5. Then he slowly started to move back and back, closer to like 8 or 9, right? And listen, he improved on his 2020 numbers. And people are acting like he had this massive downfall. Like, I get it. You saw a little bit of tread on the tires, so to speak. You saw Tony Pollard get more involved. You saw Pollard be very dynamic at times. I 100% get some of the concern. But at the end of the day, Zeke finished as RB7. And I think he's going to offer a ton of consistency at the position. And if you get him as your RB2, you should be ecstatic, right? Do the Cowboys get it done in the playoffs? No. But at the end of the day, the Cowboys are a dynamic offense, even with Amari Cooper being lost. You know that the quarterback play will be stable from Dak Prescott. I think CeeDee Lamb makes a jump. Dalton Schultz is re-signed. Michael Gallup is there. They lost Zed Wilson as well. But Pollard's there as well. Listen, Zeke's being underrated in my opinion. He absolutely deserves to be taken here. Moving on here in the middle of our running back only draft. Now, this is where I think things just get really, really, really interesting. There are a lot of names here, okay? Saquon, I'm scared of. I'll tell you guys that straight up. Aaron Jones, I felt pretty good about. I'm starting to get more scared of him. Gibson's interesting. Montgomery's interesting. And Jacobs interesting in this tier. As I would also put Elijah Mitchell in this same tier that we're currently in as well. So there's a lot to really look at and to debate in this tier. Like, you could probably also put Fournette, Connor, Elliott, and Chubb in this tier that we're currently in if we're going by ADP and what a lot of members of the fantasy community have as their overall rankings. But I'm pretty, I'm set in stone with these couple guys. Like, it's when we move on to these next couple selections that I get, almost, I don't want to say confused, but there's just a lot of back and forth here, right? So I'm going to start taking guys and we'll just go over them one by one. I'm also going to let some of, the mock drafts that we've done with you guys come into play here, right? So I'm going to go ahead and take Antonio Gibson here because I have seen him, at this point in the draft, he would easily be the next running back taken if we're going off of what I've seen in most of our Catch Fam mock drafts, right? But nonetheless, listen, he saw some regression with the touchdown numbers, right? He had double-digit rushing touchdowns in his rookie season. Overall, on the season, he still had double-digit touchdowns if we're looking at his receiving touchdowns and his rushing touchdowns. But if you look at the regression with the rushing touchdowns, right, he improved every other number. 258 attempts, or just over 1,000 rushing yards. I guess he went down in yards per carry, but oh well. And obviously he went down in rushing touchdowns, but improved his overall targets, his overall receptions, his overall receiving yards, his overall yards per touch, as well as yards per catch. And he added in, he improved on his PPR upside. Not by a whole lot, don't get me wrong, but those receiving touchdowns definitely helped. So, listen, he had some injuries. You have J.D. McKissick in this backfield. You have Jared Patterson as well. So, listen, I get it, man. There's some concern here. And I do think right where we have him drafted in this RB-only mock draft is right where he should be. But don't get me wrong, he is someone who still finished as a top 12 running back last season, and he is someone who is talented enough to make that jump. But I'm more concerned about the Washington Commanders as a whole, especially if there's some fallout with Terry McLaurin. I don't think that this receiving core is dynamic enough without Scary Terry to get much of anything at all done. You got Commander Carson at the quarterback position. I don't know how great I feel about that. You got Logan Thomas, if he can stay healthy, as a great tight end one. We just got to stay healthy. So the offense as a whole is more so what concerns me. But I do think that he's talented enough and should, be right in this tier with these other running backs that you see. Pray, what up, baby? What up? What's going on, dog? Good to have you here tonight, bro. Appreciate you being here, man. All right, moving on. It's tough, man. It's tough. I'm going to go with Aaron Jones. I'm going to take him off the board. Listen, top 10 guy last season. Missed a little. No, he didn't miss any time. Yeah, a little bit of time. That's right. He missed this one game. Had some underperforming weeks. Listen, some of these numbers are really bolstered by these big performances. Like week 2, just absolutely monster. I mean, week 14, over 20 fantasy points. But then you see a lot of just, 15 or less points, 16 points, then some, almost double-digit points. Like, overall, I can understand the concern. It's similar to Zeke, right? Where you've got A.J. Dillon there. A.J. Dillon showed some really, really good potential. He's a completely different style of running back, right? But he can still get it done through the air, which is the interesting thing, because that's the nice thing with Aaron Jones. He offers some nice PPR upside. 52 receptions, 391 receiving yards, just under 7.5 yards per catch, 6 receiving touchdowns, right? So he doesn't even necessarily have to get it done on the ground, right? He has a ton of PPR upside, but he also gets a lot of touches in the red zone. But you saw a lot of those touches go to A.J. Dillon, who still had 803 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns, and still 2 receiving touchdowns, 313 receiving yards. So I get it. You lose Davante Adams. That offense is not quite as good on paper as it was before. Right now, your receiving core is scary in a bad sense and not in a good sense. So I get that there's concerns, but Aaron Jones still talented enough, similar to Gibson, where he needs to be off the board at this point. All right, moving along, I'm going Josh Jacobs, baby. I believe in that Raiders offense. Speaking of Davante Adams, right? I don't have beef with Josh Jacobs. Once again, he missed some time last season. I get it. But overall, a top 12 running back. Listen, I do think that the Raiders will be improved with this simple addition of Davante Adams to this offense. I guess Deshaun Jackson, added as well. Hunter Renfrow, an absolute PPR machine. Bryan Edwards kind of had an underrated season, right? I like this receiving core as a whole. I like this offense as a whole, and I'm tired of the hate on Josh Jacobs. That's all I got to say. Let's take him off the board. Moving along, I'm going with David Montgomery here. Another player who I just absolutely love, and I will stand by day in and day out. I can't defend his offense or their offseason additions really at all because they have not been good. I like Darnell Mooney, don't get me wrong, quite a bit. But the Bears just have not been in position to help this offense in the offseason, to help their young quarterback, Justin Fields. But I think that could help David Montgomery get a lot more overall touches and be offered a lot more production. Now, Tariq Cohen hanging around. Oh, he got released by the Bears. Never mind. He is not hanging around. But nonetheless, Khalil Herbert is hanging around, and he filled in very nicely when Herbert was injured last season. You see these performances against Green Bay and Tampa Bay, just under 20 points each time. And he showed some flashes throughout the rest of the season as an RB2. So there's some concern there as well. But listen, I'll defend Montgomery just like I'll defend Jacobs all day. All right, moving on here. I think at this point, you have to take Saquon, right? You guys could argue that Saquon, very, very underrated in this current RB-only mock draft that we're putting together here. But I can't do it, man. It's like CMC 2.0, man. he scares me more than CMC does, and he played way more than CMC did last season, right? He only missed 4 games, right? Like, it's not, well, I guess he could argue 5, right? Because he got injured here, but so 5 games, right? Still had a pretty good year for 5 games, 593, or excuse me, for missing 5 games. But at the same time, that offensive line is bad. They have improved it somewhat in the offseason. Listen, last season, I was not high on Saquon, and it's because I did not believe in this offense. Like, I was very vocal about that. This offense actually performed pretty well at the beginning of the season, but Saquon didn't. So I don't know, man. I'm just not there. You know, if you watch this retrospectively, let me know in the comments why I'm wrong here. And if you're currently watching, let me know how you feel about Saquon and if this is too low to be on him. Spoke of the Cat, what up, baby? What up? Good to have you here tonight, man. Appreciate you stopping by. What's going on, bro? All right, I'm going to go ahead and take Elijah Mitchell off the board. I like Elijah Mitchell, man. Let me tell you. All right, McDaniels is out of the Niners, so you might see less of a running attack overall, like we saw last season, right? But also Rahim Mozart's out of there. You still got Sermon and Hasty and Jeff Wilson, right? Is Wilson still there? Wow. He re-signed. Trey Sermon's obviously still there. Is Hasty still there? Wow. Yeah, they are keeping those backs there. And then obviously you got Hushek as well, right? Listen, when Mitchell was healthy, the Niners really allowed him to actually be an RB1 last season. Now, there's some concerns here, right? Like, he had some gaps in the season, but he still finished with 963 rushing yards, 5 rushing touchdowns, and just 11 games played. Those are very good numbers for how many games he played. So as long as he can stay healthy, we're good here, right? I like the upside, and I like where his current ADP is, and I would take him in a heartbeat as an RB3. And even if he landed as my RB2, I would not mind. Let's see here. Jerry, yeah, full believer of the comeback season for Barkley. Yeah, it just, I mean, you saw some better numbers towards the end of the season, but it just never really came to fruition, right? But you did see some good overall performances, but also some really disappointing performances, like against Philly in Week 16, who was awful against the run last season. But, you know, I think he did play better than we've given him credit for last season, especially with the injuries that he dealt with, but still finished as RB30 overall, which is very disappointing. But he did miss a fair amount of time, so, I mean, we'll give him some credit. So I'm not there with Barkley, man. Have you taken Debo off the board? No, Pray. Just running backs, although I guess you could definitely argue that Debo is to some degree a running back, right? All right, we got to go Cam Akers off the board here. I'm a little bit lower on Cam Akers, and I think a lot of people are. Showed that explosiveness that we were used to from the 2020 season, or at least the end of the 2020 season. But I think the bigger problem for me, I mean, he did show that explosiveness, but he also didn't play great overall through the playoffs. This isn't going to show playoff numbers, but he had some fumbling issues, right? I don't know. I think people are just jumping the gun overall on Cam Akers. When you look at this backfield, is Sonny Michel? Yeah, he's set to be a free agent. He has not been re-signed. It doesn't look like the Rams are going to have room to re-sign him, so that shouldn't be an issue. But still, when we look at last season, you just saw a carousel of running backs. Henderson started off the season in phenomenal fashion, like essentially all the way through Week 12. Like, you have some of these performances not as high, but still not awful. But really, Henderson was the guy to start the season. And then he saw a dynamic shift to Sonny Michel. And then Week 18, we had Akers come in the discussion through the Super Bowl run out of nowhere, right? So, for me, listen, we've seen Akers drafted anywhere, from like the beginning of round 2 till, you know, the end of round 3. So I'm just going to have him a little bit lower, and I'm fine with the argument that he should be way, way lower, right? But going off of what we've seen in terms of ADP and the mock drafts that we've done with you guys, he's still being drafted pretty early. So I'll put him here tonight, but I don't feel 100% great about it, right? Paul, what's going on, bro? What's going on, man? Appreciate you stopping by tonight. Too early. in terms of Cam Akers being drafted or just us drafting in general, man. We're talking fantasy football every single week, man. But hey, man, never too early, right? Unless for Cam Akers, I'm not against that conversation. All right, this is where things get really interesting, in my opinion. Like really, really interesting. Like kind of things are going to dry up at this point in the draft, which we've seen in a lot of our mock drafts, right? J.K. Dobbins is a really interesting selection right now because Melvin Gordon might get signed to the Ravens. We don't know yet, right? So there's that dynamic. CH, I'm a lot lower on, and that's with the addition of Ronald Jones to that offense, right? I am very low on CH because it looks like Kansas City is going to have more of a committee approach. Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker, we don't know where they're going to be, right? ETN, you got James Robinson there. I know some of you guys, shout out to our boy Spence, are pretty high on ETN. I don't know if I'm completely sold there, right? I think you have some really interesting names around here, though. Kareem Hunt, Michael Carter, A.J. Dillon, and Devin Singletary as well as Rashad Penny. But call me freaking crazy. We're going with the pounder and cheese in tonight's mock draft. A top 10 fantasy running back in full PPR last season. And listen, man, I would be completely against drafting Cordero Patterson if it wasn't for the fact that he is sticking with the Falcons. Listen, Mariota's the quarterback. You got no receiving core. Mike Davis is Mike Davis still on this team next season? Did he sign a 1 or 2 year deal? Yeah, expected to return. Okay, I just want to make sure. Listen, this offense is going to be bad, man. It's not going to be good. But the one fantasy relevant player on this team for me all season long next season outside of Kyle Pitts is going to be Cordero Patterson. And listen, what he did last season was just freaking crazy. 618 rushing yards, 6 rushing touchdowns, 548 receiving yards, and 5 receiving touchdowns. So double digits in overall touchdowns and over 1,000 yards from scrimmage overall. So I love Patterson. I think he's an absolute steal where he's being drafted right now. You could argue he could even be higher on this list. I don't care, man. Jerry, in a few weeks, we're about to have daily mock drafts. I'm looking forward to it at 1,000%, bro. It is much closer than you think. All right. For the sake of argument here, right, I'm going to take J.K. Dobbins, although there are some concerns, right? Right now, John Harbaugh 2 weeks ago said there's a chance Dobbins begins training camp on the PUP list. And then you got the Melvin Gordon situation. And the Ravens showed last season that they kind of like the committee approach, right? We saw all kinds of names. You also had Latavius Murray and Le'Veon Bell in the mix. Remember when Tyson Williams looked like the guy those first 2 weeks, and then what the hell happened? He just completely got erased, right? Gus Edwards is a running back who the Ravens absolutely love. He looked like he was going to get his shot last season to be an RB1 or at least have a 50-50 split. Or no, Dobbins was already hurt. That's right. Then Edwards came up. That's right. Dobbins got hurt. Listen, man, it's tough, especially if Melvin Gordon gets added to that running back room. We shall see if that happens or not. And for the sake of argument, right, I mean, we could go ahead and add. Let's see if there's any update on Melvin Gordon. Still just in discussions, man. It's kind of hard to say. But let's say, for the sake of argument, he does get added to the Ravens offense, to the Ravens as a whole. Let's just go ahead and put him in tonight's conversation. I mean, obviously we know the Ravens are going to run the football like crazy. You lose some touches to Lamar Jackson, but they also showed that last season that doesn't necessarily matter. So we'll go ahead and take them off the board, but it's still kind of an open discussion there. All right, moving along, man. I'm going to go ahead and take Kareem Hunt here because we have had a lot of buzz around Kareem Hunt in our mock drafts with you guys, with the Catch fam, as an RB3, even as an RB2 for teams that are going like receiver heavy or receiver early or one running back, then receiver, tight end, QB and then are just in need of a late round running back. Listen, Kareem Hunt was on fire at the beginning of last season before he dealt with injuries and missed a lot of time last season. But we did a mid-season catch fam league last year where we drafted week 5 or week 4. Not necessarily mid-season, but you get the point, right? And Kareem Hunt was like my second pick in that draft or my third pick in that draft, right? I mean, he was on fire last season, right? Only played 8 games, but behind Nick Chubb still put up very good numbers. So we're seeing a lot of good buzz out of Kareem Hunt. And, yeah. I'm going to go and take him off the board because why not? And the Browns overall could be much improved as an offense with their new quarterback addition. You could definitely argue as well. Next, I'm going to go Rashad Penny. Call me crazy, man, but I think that Pete Carroll has always been in love with Rashad Penny. And we really saw him come into play weeks 14 onward last season, really with the only disappointing week being week 15 against the Rams. Right? Don't get me wrong, Chris Carson's still hanging around, and he was on great pace when healthy last season as well. I'm more bullish on Rashad Penny because I literally think Pete Carroll has been waiting and waiting since they drafted Rashad Penny to utilize him. Like, he showed some of those flashes. Not in 2020, maybe. Yeah, that's right. He was healthy in 2019 at times, and it's always been complicated with that backfield, right? But I just feel good about Rashad Penny. I would really like him as my RB3 overall. Moving on. Listen, we should probably take Breece Hall off of the board. He's, at this point, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, we're seeing him as the running back that is most praised in terms of rookie running backs. We just don't know what team he's going to be on. So I'll leave it at that. I mean, you could argue, like in Dynasty, he's huge right now, right? But it just depends on what team he goes to. Is he going to be an RB1? Is he going to be behind someone or not? So we'll take him off the board. Why not? All right, moving along here, man. There's some really good names. There are some names that I like quite a bit here, actually. Let's take both ETN and Robinson off the board. Let's talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars running backs just a little bit here, okay? There's some of you guys in the Catch fam very, very high on ETN. Some of you guys who think he will be the RB1, and there's some of us who are more willing to take a chance on James Robinson. If you're asking me personally, Robinson's going to miss some time, more than likely. Looks like ETN's more ready to be ready by the start of the season. We'll find out as the offseason continues to progress. But Doug Peterson has a history of utilizing multiple running backs like he did with his time with the Philadelphia Eagles. So we'll find out, man. I would almost want to spend a later draft pick on James Robinson and have him as my RB3 or RB4, right? But then you could also argue that if ETN gets the starting role earlier, he takes off with it. We know how talented he is. We know that we didn't get to see him play last season as well. I've seen both arguments, and I'm good with either one, but you're probably getting them as your RB3. That's the price that you're paying right now. I could see the argument either way, and it's, both are fair arguments for sure. All right, moving on here. It gets really interesting, but I'm going Damian Harris, man. I think he's been relatively underrated. We'll talk about Ramondre Stevenson shortly because I really like Stevenson as well. But overall, Belichick proved last season that he did help out fantasy owners to some degree. He didn't make it as clear cut, but a little bit better than it has been in past years. Now, James White is, was hurt last season, so that affected things as well. Although we did see J.J. Taylor, pick up some of that receiving work last season. Not J.J. Taylor. Not J.J. Wasn't there another back on the Patriots that I can't remember right now who took over some of that receiving work? But, look at what James White did when he was healthy last season. Double-digit performances in Week 1 and Week 2. So we know that if White returns fully healthy, he did re-sign a 2-year deal with the Patriots. He will take away, not necessarily touches, but some overall work in some of those formations. He is not a guy who's going to get it done on the ground a whole lot, but he will get it done through the air in certain formations. Right now, Stevenson and Harris, two very interesting backs. We really liked Stevenson as a sleeper going into last season here at the catch, and he did perform well in his rookie season. But overall, getting back to the point, for Belichick, he liked to run the damn football last season. He liked to take that pressure off of his rookie quarterback, Mac and Cheese, our guy, Mac Jones. But Damien Harris sure as hell benefited the most from that. 15 rushing touchdowns on the season. He easily helped a lot of you guys win your fantasy playoffs and fantasy championships as well. At least 17 points in each of his final 3 weeks of the regular season, right? 929 rushing yards, 15 rushing touchdowns. Does not have that PPR upside, but man, I like both these Patriot running backs, both Harris and Stevenson. And you could even argue White, but I like Harris the most out of the three. All right, moving on to a running back who I see in kind of a similar sense. I'm going to go ahead and take Devin Singletary here of the Buffalo Bills. And listen, he's another back who really got it done at the end of the season. We have always been frustrated with this Bills running back room. Like, this offense is so damn good. Why can't we just have a clear-cut RB1? Well, we saw what that would look like at the end of the season last year, and we wish we got more of it, right? 870 rushing yards and 7 rushing touchdowns off 188 attempts on the season. I think he's very, very similar to Damien Harris, and I'll go ahead and take him off the board here, but God, I hope that he really is a clear-cut RB1 next season. I'm going to go Michael Carter next off the list here. I've heard some buzz that you could see Ty Johnson, maybe get more back in this mix, maybe Coleman as well. It's hard to say, but I thought that for a rookie campaign, Carter really showed a lot of promise. He had some injuries, some very disappointing games as well, but I thought he showed enough promise that I like him as an RB3 and especially as an RB4 for next season, especially if you're of the sentiment that the Jets could improve offensively as well. Moving on here, man, gosh, now it gets really, really interesting. But we'll go Miles Sanders. He needs to be off the board. The biggest fear with Miles Sanders is that Boston Scott's going to get work. Is Jordan Howard still on this team? I guess. He's going to get work. Kenneth Gainwell is going to work. Hell, Jason Huntley's probably going to get work. And hell, Jalen Hurts is going to rush the football to some degree. And I mean, who knows? Maybe Gardner Minshew will get some rushing work the way that the Eagles implemented their running backs last season. I mean, they love to run the football, the most rushing yards by any team in the league, but the problem is it's not one guy doing it. It's 3 or 4 guys, and they're all going to be relevant at times next season. You're just going to be rolling the dice all over the place. And listen, Miles Sanders essentially offers no scoring upside whatsoever on the ground or through the air. But overall, he's going to be the RB1 in that room, whatever the hell that means. So let's take him off the board. All right. Moving on here, I would go A.J. Dillon here, and you could even argue that A.J. Dillon should be higher. We talked about him earlier, so I'm not going to talk too much or touch on A.J. Dillon too much. We talked about him when we drafted Aaron Jones, but with A.J. Dillon, one of the best handcuff situations in the entire league, and you could argue he's not even a handcuff situation. He is a running back who gets work whether Aaron Jones is healthy or not, and he is a running back on the come up in his junior campaign, so he should absolutely be off the board here. Next, man, if you're asking me, I would take a high chance on Tony Pollard as one of the best handcuffs in the league right here. And then, honestly, call me crazy, man, but I would go handcuff again with Alexander Mattison next. I love these. Dillon, Pollard, Mattison, arguably the best quote-unquote handcuffs in the entire league right now. And I feel great about all 3 guys being my RB4, especially going into next season. All right, at this point, oh man, this is where things we're just gonna have some really loose discussion here. I would probably go Ronald Jones over CH personally. Don't ask me why. I think that CH has just been underwhelming year after year. When we look, 2020 was not that bad, but obviously, just hasn't performed to that point that we wish that he would. And I think that Ronald Jones is going to get a fair shot. So similar to how we drafted Etienne and Robinson or Dobbins and Gordon, I'll just take both the Chiefs running backs off here. It's a 50-50 shot, man. I could be right. You could be right. I could be wrong. You could be wrong. Who the hell knows, right? They're both going to get work, though. And, I mean, you could, I will say this much about CH or Ronald Jones. Patty Mahomes and Andy Reid are going to have to utilize the running backs a little bit more with the departure of Tyreek Hill. So, that's a fair argument for drafting either of those guys. All right, from what we've seen in mock drafts thus far, Chase Edmonds is going as the RB1 for the Dolphins, but gosh, I want nothing to do with this backfield next season. I like a lot of these players. I like Rahim Mozart. I like Philip Lindsay. I like Chase Edmonds. Myles Gaskin, very disappointing year to year. Patrick Laird is not a bad running back either, but I mean, on paper, for like a Madden team, this is great, but from a fantasy standpoint, this is not good. But still, looking at what we've seen in mock drafts with you guys, he's still being drafted like a potential RB1, so we'll take him off the board here. Once again, at this point, I will go Ramondre Stevenson next off the board. We talked about him when we drafted Najee Harris, and you could even argue, Stevenson should be in that mix with like a Pollard or Madison as a handcuff, but really he's getting work even if Harris is healthy. So it's more similar to like a AJ Dillon. And I like Stevenson a lot, especially with, that point I made that we saw Belichick run the football a lot last season and take a lot of that pressure off Mac Jones. You could argue Mac Jones will, to some degree, progress in his sophomore campaign, but nonetheless, I do think that the Patriots run the football a lot next season. All right. If Isaiah Spiller and Kenneth Walker go to the right teams, hell, we'll take them. If they're not on the right teams, we're not taking them, right? There's just, for me personally, unless you're in a dynasty league, it's just not the right time to have the conversation about those guys, but they definitely have the talent to be draftable RB1s and potential handcuff situations next season. All right, now we're moving into mainly handcuffs and RB2s, which we've already been touching on a little bit. So we're kind of nearing the end of tonight's mock draft. But man, the guy who I'm going to take a flyer on here is Justin Jackson, 100%. Because we know, for all the reasons that we took Austin Eckler number 2 tonight, you could argue we should take Justin Jackson a little bit earlier, right? There's nothing but good things to say about what the Chargers have done in the offseason and the potential that this offense has as a whole. But also we know that Eckler's semi-prone to injury. So I like Jackson a lot as a sleeper handcuff that not enough people are talking about. You could argue having him right next to Madison, Pollard, and Dillon as well. Hybrid Harry, what is up, brother? What is going on, man? Swinging by to smash that like button for you, bro. Have a great stream. Hope everyone's having an awesome day. Hey, I appreciate that, man. Appreciate you, Harry, man. It's awesome to see you in the chat tonight. Great to have you, bro. All right, moving on, man. Oh, God. It's just ugly here. I'm going to argue for Rahim Mozart in Miami, though. If he is fully healthy, we know what he is capable of. But, gosh, he has been inconsistent over the years. But if he can be fully healthy, you look at this offense, it is based on speed. We know that Tua can be dynamic if he is healthy. You got Tyreek Hill. You add Sid Wilson as well, two extremely fast receivers, and you got Jalen Waddle in there as well. I mean, this team is built for speed. I think that Preston Williams, he got re-signed as well. He's extremely fast. I mean, just imagine if Will Fuller was staying with this team. That'd just be, I mean, I guess technically he still could, but a lot of speed. And I think that McDaniels could be, more than likely to use Rahim Mozart. So I'll argue for Mozart there as well. I guess we'll just take Gaskin off the board. I mean, just a disappointing fantasy player overall, but he was the most productive back in that backfield last season. But I won't be surprised if Gaskins gets traded. I mean, we'll just take him off the board. Why not, right? We'll take Chris Carson here. You could argue that I got Carson too low, but like I said, I just personally believe in Rashad Penny over Carson at this point in time. But don't get me wrong, 2020, Carson missed some time, but still had a very good season. 2018, played phenomenal. Last season, he missed the most time of his whole career. So, tough to say. Maybe I'm drafting him, maybe I'm overlooking him, maybe I'm drafting him too low, but we'll go ahead and take him off the board. He shouldn't be available, so to speak, right now. We'll take James Cook. I meant to take James White here, but why not take James Cook? We are already taking all the rookies off the board here, so why not? Yeah, where is James White listed, man? Wow, he must be low. Yeah, let's take James White off the board as well. Once again, when healthy, offers extreme PPR upside. So, and started last season great. So, why not? Yeah, why not? Gosh, he just had that great chemistry with Brady. He really did. All right. Henderson shouldn't be available. Let's take him off the board. Chuba's interesting because he was like a clear-cut handcuff, and then he got Foreman in there. So we'll take the Panthers running backs. But I do really like Khalil Herbert as a handcuff option. You could easily argue that he should be a little bit higher overall. He is a really nice handcuff, especially with Montgomery's overall injury history. Let's take Gainwell off the board. Why not? Nahim Heinz. Nahim Heinz as well as J.D. McKissic. Both RB2s, clear-cut RB2s who offer just really nice PPR upside, especially against the right teams, right? So we'll go ahead and take Nahim Heinz here, and then we'll go ahead and take J.D. McKissic as well. Both these backs offer some nice PPR upside within the right matchups, right? I'm not feeling great about Jamal Williams. Sony Michel's not on the team. Is Kenyon Drake? Oh, he's still with the Raiders? Yeah. We could take Drake off the board here. Why not? Trey Sermon is kind of interesting here. We'll take him as an RB2 for the Niners. I don't mind that move. Gus Edwards, we'll take him off the board, but if Gordon truly signs with the Ravens, that really, really hurts Edwards' overall value, right? We'll take Samaje Perine here because he did fill in nicely for Joe Mixon last season. We'll take Zach Moss as well. Someone who actually played at times really well for the Bills, especially at the beginning of the season. Looked like we actually had a clear-cut RB1. Really just this poor performance against Tennessee. Weeks 2 through 8, he looked great, and then he just fell off completely. So, yeah, we'll sprinkle some Zach Moss in there, but I don't trust that backfield outside of Singletary as like a RB3 or RB4. Man, I hope Marlon Mack can do something for Houston, but I'm not drafting any Houston running backs right now. There's just not enough information, and that might do it for the night. That might truly do it for the night because I think we're just getting into too many hypotheticals, too many rookies, too many unsigned running backs. Just because Houston has to have an RB1, we'll go ahead and we'll take a couple of their running backs and Mack and Johnson. I hope Mack can come back and play fully healthy and everything. But outside of that, even like Jamal Williams was a really underperforming RB2 last season, who a lot of people felt had a lot of potential for good reason. He played great for Green Bay as an RB2, but it just didn't really pan out with the Lions. And then now we're just getting into RB3s. Too many rookies, too many handcuff situations that I just don't feel as good about. We'll look pretty. Then we're just getting into free agents even. There are plenty of these running backs that could come up with injuries, could move up on depth charts and things like that. But overall, yeah, that's going to do it. It's going to do it for the night. For the sake of argument, let's just draft Deebo Samuel to end things because he is essentially a running back as well. So why not? So there you have it, guys. That was a lot of fun. That was a lot of information at once and a lot of speaking. But so nonetheless, that was a ton of fun, guys. Like I said, man, Monday kicked my butt today. So I apologize, a little bit off my game tonight, but I still had an absolute blast. And I'm going to try and do this at each position. Try and do at least one of these every week. So I hope this was fun. A little bit of a different stream overall, but just wanted to change it up from those solo mock drafts and kind of savor some of the mock drafts that we've been doing with you guys. So we will be mock drafting Wednesday night at 8 p.m. sharp. The link is currently in or on the Discord page, so make sure you guys join if you are interested in drafting with us, and just come out, have some fun, practice. We always have a blast. Steven will be in the building Wednesday night with myself as well, so come hang out, come have some fun. All right, that's going to do it for tonight's draft. Like I said, hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys got plenty of running back information and some overall thought process going for your current running back rankings as well. So yeah, I had a blast with you guys, man. Thank you guys so much to everyone who came out and hung out, everyone who got in the chat. Appreciate you guys for hanging out with me tonight. Hope everyone enjoyed the stream. Hit that like button on the way out. Hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Go ahead and join the Catch fam. Love you guys, man. Love the Catch fam. Love this community. Love this channel, man. Thank you guys so much for everything that you guys continue to do to support the Catch here in the fantasy off season. And I will talk to you guys tomorrow. I believe Steven will be doing a stream tomorrow for you guys, and I will be doing a later one as well. And then Wednesday night we'll be mock drafting together with you guys. So looking forward to the rest of the weekend, the rest of the content and the rest of the streams for the week. So appreciate you guys so much, man. Got nothing else to say, but thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on the Catch. And peace.